All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to inGains and Fintech Connect webinar. Today is our second series, together with Stella Jemeljanova, the founder and CEO of Expolux. And we are covering market entries in different regions. So last week, together with Stella, we talked about Africa. Today we'll be covering Southeast Asia. And next week, you can tune in for LATAM or Latin America. So hi, Stella, once again, happy to see you. How are you?
Hi, Armands. Happy to see you again. I'm good, thank you. How about you?
Yeah, all good. I couldn't wait actually for Southeast Asia topic because, well, this is probably where we met for the first time in face, and this is where, let's say, also we know each other from professional life. And yeah, but as we talk about it, maybe then for those people who didn't join in last week and maybe who don't know about you, maybe you can introduce yourself because, well, I call you a global citizen and international fintech expert because you've been living and running business in Europe and in different parts of the world. So yeah, please tell about yourself.
Sure. Yeah, indeed. I'm a global citizen, and it's pity that there is no global citizen ID invented yet. Hopefully, it will come
Maybe a
soon.
new startup idea.
Maybe. So yeah, my name is Stella, and I'm currently based in Tanzania in Africa. However, I'm coming from Europe for our small, cozy country called Latvia. But for the last 7 years, I have been living in different countries. Those are Sweden, Vietnam, the Philippines, Kenya, Uganda, and in Tanzania for the last year. And what I'm doing here, I'm supporting the fintechs with their expansion plans to developing regions like Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America, where there is very hard to find professionals who can support foreigners with the launch of fintech licensing and all the ongoing tasks. And on the other hand, I'm also doing a bit of IT. We have a data company in the Philippines, which helps to boost the financial inclusion to digital lenders, supplying them the alternative data so they could improve their risk management, increase acceptance rate, and to give the opportunity to get a loan to the customers who previously were unbanked and just couldn't get the loan because of absence of credit history.
All right, great. Thanks. Yeah, so today we will be speaking about Southeast Asia, and this is one of the 3 regions we are looking at. So from your perspective, why it's worth looking at this region? What's about it?
I would say that this is super interesting region for investors with big money.
Okay.
Why so? Because Southeast Asian region is super saturated with fintechs. There are more than 2,000 fintechs, and I'm not talking about like 3 people sitting in some garage, but I'm talking about the real payment giants or e-wallets, and there are super advanced technologies there. And that's why this competition, it requires really big investments for the ones who want to enter it. But at the same time, because of this development, the level of development, this region is, first of all, super tech savvy. They are super easily embracing new solutions. It's much easier here to find the workplace because there are so many international companies that who already trained the staff, who already grew up their own specialists. And of course, it's always good that there are specialists on the market. And of course, given the history of fintech here is definitely more than 10 years, and the first digital lenders appeared 10 years ago, even earlier, that definitely there is an expertise in how to launch and how to lead the fintechs there. And on the other hand, the maybe drawbacks are regulation, saturation, and again, some investors, they're a bit blinded, but all the success of big companies, which are backed by some other giants like Alipay and some others, and they do not understand that this is not easy region anymore. So it's definitely hard, but super interesting region.
Okay. But then Southeast Asia, it actually includes a lot of countries, and it's certainly worth speaking about the differences in these regions. And also, if we look at Indonesia itself, I think alone in one country there is so much of difference. So yeah, how would you, let's say, try to generalize? Because we can't go probably into very small details, but like on a general level, like what are the differences you need to account for when looking at the region?
So I would say that in general, it's divided into three parts. First, it's of course Singapore, which is out of any comparison. That's one of the most successful cities in the world. Second one, there are countries like the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia. We can also count Thailand here. Indonesia is somewhere in between Singapore and those countries, because again, it has more than 200 million people. So it was the first point where all the fintechs appeared. So Indonesia is somewhere in between. And then the third part is Brunei, Laos, Cambodia, which are definitely behind those countries in terms of development, fintech development, regulation, and everything. So I guess in general, the most, of course, interesting what is happening in this middle part, because there are many countries in this middle part. At the same time, of course, those four undeveloped countries, they might have an interest from the investors because they're not saturated yet. But the key thing is that indeed, those countries with the biggest population, again, we're not talking about Singapore here, they had so much attention from China, started from China 10 years ago and more, that of course their development, the growth here was insane. And they are definitely where the core competition lies. And that's definitely must be considered by anyone who is entering the region.
Okay. So they do have a lot of experience with international investors, but what would you say about the attitudes towards them? What connotations they bring? Because, well, certainly last time I was in Southeast Asia doing business, it was probably like 5 years ago or so. And I remember back then it was rather negative when it came to, let's say, Chinese investors. They were happy to, if somebody else was coming, except that part of the world. So how you see it today?
How I see it today, definitely how they treat investors is in a very professional way if we, let's say, compare it to Africa as we talked last time, because in Southeast Asia, in Singapore only, it's 1,600 startups are registered, meaning that those are investors or teams from the whole world. And people there in Southeast Asia, again, if we're talking more or less about more developed countries there, they are already educated that investor is not someone who just gives you money. Investor is someone who gives you money to make your dream true and earn from it. And they understand that even the young population, like 20 something, they already have some knowledge that there is a path how to work with the investors, that it's not one day cooperationship, that there is sustainability must be there. And regarding China, it's a very good point. It's because Chinese guys, they jumped in 10 years ago or even more when there was nothing, literally nothing. And they started to do something to earn quick money. And many regulation what exists now on the market is because the Chinese, they started to harass people, they started to break the rules, the common rules. They started they basically tried to earn money very aggressively and quickly. And of course, when it comes, then the regulation also follows after this. But in my opinion, these days, over time, they will be forgotten. Because now, even the regulation is there, and we'll talk about it later a bit, so that it's not anymore. You cannot follow same strategy as they used to follow. Now you really need to comply, and the capital requirements in some countries are pretty big. So meaning the people with the small money, they will not be able just to come to do something, mess up, and jump out quickly. It will be just, it's always actually impossible, more or less.
Okay, so meaning that it will be a big strategic decision to do so. And if you invest so heavily, so you really want to abide the rules and earn in the long term, not the short term.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, but then since we are focusing probably more on this alternative lending space, so how would you describe what products are in need? And because, well, there's a lot of online, there's a lot of offline as well. And so anything specific for the region, or maybe it's different country by country, if you could comment on that.
Sure. Southeast Asia in general has very rich fintech development history. Again, we started with the Chinese who entered, then we started with some Russians and Europeans who launched payday loans. They're desperately trying to squeeze out of the market as much money as possible. Then regulation came, and now, in my opinion, now this is the era of more sustainable products, which are not just money makers for someone, but which are helpful to the society. We see more and more buy now, pay later. So in the Philippines, for example, you can even go to Gucci and to buy some clothes with buy now, pay later possibility. E-commerce is super developed, and given that how tech savvy this region is, the Shopee, which is, I guess, in almost all Southeast Asian countries, and Lazada, they have huge target audience. And again, people want to buy something in credit, because we should not forget, even though the region is very advanced in terms of technology, the poverty is still there. There's many people who are earning kind of 50 USD per month, 30 USD per month, especially when we're talking about the Indonesia and the Philippines, which have thousands of islands, and some islands, they even don't have internet connection. This population should not be forgotten, because it's definitely, it's not Europe or it's not United States yet, even though it's so developed already. And so far, the most trendy, it's a mass market. So consumer loans, but however, it's not high interest consumer loans, but those are buy now, pay later. Those are advanced salary loans, when the companies are signing the agreement with the employer and gets the payment withdrawn from someone's salary. Those are niche loans. For example, in Indonesia, there is more than 1 million seafarers. In the Philippines, 300,000 more seafarers. They all want loan, and they have very, very stable job. I would say one of the most stable in the world. So basically, now what the companies are trying to do, they are trying to still grasp this mass market, but find someone who is not grasped yet. And on the other hand, it's very hard to do, given that if we're talking about lenders, there are tens of good, stable lenders in each country. Even in Indonesia, it's much more than tens or 20 or so, let's say. So, and in my point of view, SME lending is still not there. So there are only several companies which are good in SME lending. For example, one of them, Founding Societies, which is based in Singapore, but they are in five other Southeast Asian countries, and which is the biggest SME lender in Southeast Asia. However, this part, I would say that is much less saturated than any of the mass market loans. And definitely given that after COVID, situation with the payments changed a lot, and now more than 50% of the population, I would say that even closer to 70%, they're using digital payments, but definitely the online loans is something what is trendy. But again, we should not forget that there are still people around who are living in poor areas, cannot afford something, but maybe they have still small but stable income, and they might be eligible for some small loan for starting even their own street food job.
Okay. But what's your take maybe on also the competition that is emerging from other large players? So, for example, Grab app. They started as a taxi app, and they became a super app where basically you can do everything you want. And at some point in time, they also started lending money to their drivers. So do you see this becoming, let's say, also a bigger trend that these type of players actually do enter, and that maybe mobile payments, these apps that they also start providing, let's say, some lending products?
Definitely, and this is one of the reasons why if someone wants to launch something sustainable there, the investor needs a lot of money, because he will not compete with some small players. He will compete with Grab, with Lazada, who has also their own loans, payments, Gcash in the Philippines, for example, which has own loans, many companies in Indonesia, and all the companies which are more or less successful there, they're trying indeed build an ecosystem. It's not just lending, it's not just payment. This is combination of different segments or different sectors of the business which are complementing each other. And of course, it's very hard to fight or to compete, maybe it's better word, when the Grab, they have information about the drivers, about the orders, then processed payments. Of course, the risk assessment for the loans, it has so big advantage comparing to some other players. So, but what is good in Southeast Asia, that there is a big competition in terms of these services. And I mean, in terms of digital lending, but it's not like, let's say in Africa, there are few big companies who literally monopolize the market. But here, there's so many companies that eventually the consumer gets the benefit of this competition, lower prices, better service. So that's definitely a positive point for the consumers, but of course, maybe not that positive for the investors.
Okay. Well, but anyways, it's huge markets, seems lucrative, and there's a lot of big players also from Europe and elsewhere that still think and look at Southeast Asia. So maybe let's jump into the practicalities. So what it takes to set up and launch the operations in Southeast Asia, and then maybe we can also try and reflect on these three different Southeast Asias, as you mentioned, like Singapore being one of them, then these more developed countries like Philippines, Indonesia, and then of course the Cambodia and others. So maybe then what about the process actually of setting up and going live?
I would say that Singapore, it's even, maybe we can here to combine it with all these more developed countries,
Okay.
because recently those developed countries, all of them, they introduced some sort of regulation to the digital lending. And basically in this case, we divide the region into two parts. So basically all these, again, developed countries like the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, Vietnam, and basically the rest like Brunei, Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar. In those developed countries, all of them, they have regulation for the digital lender. And Indonesia, I would say it's together with Singapore, is the most harsh regulation. So Indonesia, they require more than 1 million of a capital in order to launch the digital lending. Of course, it has again the story that in 2018 or 17, there were maybe around 1,000 or something like this digital lending companies. Remember the day when 300 companies were just blocked in Indonesia. They woke up and their website is not just working, 300 within one day. And Singapore, even now, Singapore actually suspended the issuance of digital lending license because they want to control what is happening in the country. Vietnam is also, it's a bit different than the rest of the countries in terms of the political regime. Vietnam is a communist country, and meaning the government really rules in Vietnam. And recent changes, again, were that they want to have a sandbox for digital lenders, but they don't want to have small amounts issuers. So they don't want to have payday lenders in their country. So they want more SME, some sort of peer-to-peer where the investors are investing, like we have Mintos or something. So and of course, this again makes difficulty for consumer lenders, for digital lenders to operate in Vietnam. Malaysia, it's actually the other way around. Malaysia, several years ago, they introduced a digital lending license. And finally, the official digital lending license, so it actually boosted the development here. But Malaysia, comparing to other countries, this is Muslim country. So meaning that the lenders, when they're looking at Malaysia, they also have to understand that they're dealing with Islam. So meaning that the rules of Sharia are different than other countries in this region have. When we're talking about those countries with which are not so developed, Myanmar, of course, they had recently, like a few years ago, civil war. Let's call it this way, and that's not very attractive for the investors, as there is a huge risk. The rest, they are not boosting, or the government is not doing anything to boost the digital lender, because, for example, even in Cambodia, the interest rate is limited because there is no differentiation between digital lender and non-digital lender, what puts all the lenders at a cap of the interest. It was around 22, if not mistaken, % or something like this. There are some workarounds, but again, workarounds, it's not sustainable business. Workarounds is quickly to go there, to do something and jump out. So basically, that's of course the decision of the investor, what he wants to do. But in general, of course, to get the license in these lucrative developed countries, of course, it requires really a lot of money. But the good thing, really good thing about Southeast Asia, that if there are steps how to get the license, if you follow those steps, you provide all the information, you will get the license. So it not be that, okay, you did everything and suddenly they say, no, sorry. If it's no, maybe information was incomplete, or, I mean, there was a big reason behind no. But rather than this, it will be definitely yes. So of course, when there is a loss on place, of course, it's much more the investors feel much more comfortable with the licensing process.
Yeah, you won't be blocked overnight, or your team won't be arrested. So which also happened. All right, but then also I do remember about Indonesia, which seemed very interesting. Is that the licensing was not only about the fact that they want to know who are the players and that they abide by some rules, but they also promoted financial education. If you were a license holder, you actually had to go into society like universities and so on, and basically run the courses on financial literacy, and they really leveraged the regulator leveraged the market players basically to contribute to the society. So maybe you can comment more on this, and is any other country in the region in Southeast Asia trying to adopt something similar?
At least I'm not aware of any other country which adopted this way, but in general, why I would say on one hand excited about Indonesia. It's super hard country for launch. Indeed, super hard country. But what I'm really excited is about in general fintech cooperation there. There is a proper association which is following fintechs, which is kind of course, there is an official regulator, OJK, but then the fintech association is trying to implement self-regulation.
Yes.
What
Yeah.
actually is super rare case, because usually those associations, there is networking, maybe some event, maybe a bit of conversation with the government here and there. But in Indonesia, the fintech association is a serious player, and you need to follow as a fintech their guidelines. They even have the data exchange for digital lenders, which can join and get the data about some other players in Indonesia. So I would say that this is in general a very unique example, not only in Southeast Asia, but in the whole world. There are in developed countries, there are of course situations, but Indonesia is really, I'm really excited about them, and the guys did a super good job. Also about this literacy. Also they implement the rule that, for example, foreigners cannot hold 100% of the shares of the digital lending, meaning that they want also the locals to be included, not just foreigners coming and making money out of Indonesia.
Yeah.
So same with the technical stuff. So basically they're checking what are the technologies used by the company. So you cannot run the digital lending in Excel, for example, keeping
Yes.
your data of your customers somewhere, on private laptop.
Yeah. And they are also quite strict on data storage. It has the roots and backgrounds that the markets used to be jeopardized by some Chinese players who actually were mismanaging the data in the worst case. But yeah. All right, but here we go into the data then. So of course, to set up the scoring and understand the affordability and paybacks. So yeah, how do you see this whole risk assessment in this region?
I really like the direction where Southeast Asia moving to. So in general, the companies there which have alternative data like Grab, like payment gateways, e-commerces, they're very open to cooperation and in general to data monetization. So there are plenty of companies which are doing alternative scoring, for example, Credolab. So they're based in Singapore. They're doing scoring based on the application, so mobile application in, I guess, almost all the Southeast Asian countries, maybe even all. So very interesting product. There is Brancas in the Philippines, which is doing open banking. So they succeeded in getting KPI with the banks, and they can provide to the lenders and some other fintechs payment data. There are also payment gateways which are cooperating in terms of provision of data, like Dragon Pay, for example, same in the Philippines. In Vietnam, there is a Momo wallet, one of the biggest wallets in the Vietnam. Again, they have their own score and they are providing the score to the digital lenders, so they make a better decision. And at the same time, Southeast Asia also grasps international solutions. iOvation for fraud prevention, Xeon for fraud prevention, Juicy Score, which is not with the headquarters not in Southeast Asia. It's also used by digital lenders in Southeast Asia. And again, it only confirms the fact that how tech savvy the region is if it grasps all the technologies or data alternatives which do belong to the region and which are outside region. So they're open-minded and they're cooperating with the companies based on how reasonable the deal is, not just by, okay, I'm your friend, let's cooperate. You're not my friend, we will not cooperate.
Although this is still it for the offline lending, especially in Indonesia on these small islands, tribe lending, so to say. Your guarantor is the major of your tribe, and they feel so much ashamed if they didn't pay back that the tribe would know, and this is like self-controlling mechanism. Of course, that still exists, but yeah. All right.
Same in some other countries, like in Vietnam and the Philippines. If the neighbors knows that I'm the debtor, it's really shame on me, and people are ashamed.
Okay. Yeah, but then maybe if we started talking about debt collection, so what about debt collection?
I would say that debt collection is still a pretty weak point there.
Okay.
Of course, again, we're not talking about Singapore now. Singapore is scope because Singapore is structured, addresses are there, and people are super well educated. But if we are talking about all these countries with a big population where it's hard to find people, people really, they are not really afraid of calls. They used to be afraid when lenders were calling them, telling, okay, I will call to your relatives, because person didn't want relatives to know or friends to know that he's debtor. But now the regulation is more or less there that you are not allowed to give this information to the third party about someone loan. So meaning that it made collection a bit harder comparing how it was, but at the same time more ethical, of course. And in some of the countries, the selling of the debt, it's already there. It's in the Philippines. Many years the companies are selling the debts to the third parties for the collection. But in general, in mass market, we still have just one tool. It's calls. The only thing what is actually happening, started to happen recent times, is of course reporting to the credit bureau. When you are telling to people that you will be reported to the credit bureau, and credit bureaus last 5 years, depending on the countries, they started to gather the report from fintechs. So of course, people then they will think twice if they really want to limit their credit history with some small loan, or maybe they will actually better to repay and get some opportunity later on.
Yeah. All right. But then we did jump from scoring into debt collection, but then of course there is this customer acquisition as an important part. And one thing is where you generate leads, but also what are the channels for the customer acquisition, because it's not always the website where the traffic comes from.
First of all, in Southeast Asia, Facebook is super popular. The Facebook in some countries, the core traffic, the main traffic comes from Facebook actually, not from some searches or website.
Yeah, which is interesting, by the way. I do remember that in Europe, nobody follows the lenders. In Philippines, like there would be hundreds of thousands followers to the lenders.
I remember even once, there was one group in the Philippines on Facebook, they had 100,000 people, and the group was related to the small loans. And when launched, we published some advertisement on this page, and basically within one day we've got like 10,000 or something like this applications for the loans. Just, I mean, that was free marketing, literally. But at the same time, we need to highlight that because of this competition, crazy competition on in Southeast Asian region, of course, the cost of leads, it's crazy. It goes, again, we're not talking about Singapore, there are different numbers, but in general, overall, when 5 years ago, it was like 5 USD, 6 USD. Now it's like already 30 USD and above, more or less. So the prices grew up like insanely. And actually, again, we're coming to the point that ecosystems are the ones who are actually winning the game, because they have different type of businesses where they already have database and they can do a cross-sell here.
Yeah, true. Okay, but then maybe about the acquisition, because I do remember there was a mix of everything. There were apps, there were websites, and there were even kiosks. And all of these three acquisition channels actually are run by a single lending company. They just try to let's say, manage several verticals. So how it's like today?
I would say that it's more or less the same. So basically, in general, what happens when it comes to the competing for digital customers, there is a price bidding. When one platform, for example, comparison loan platform, it connects many fintechs, and basically who increase the price?
Yes.
That's the first. So I would say that even in some countries, the competition started to be even more tense, of course, given that many competitors joined, rather than, let's say, when I've been living there like 5 years ago when I just came. Again, we are coming back to saying 5-6 USD versus like 30 USD and more now.
Okay, but so is it still relevant that actually mobile app is probably #1 acquisition channel?
No, Facebook, I would say that it's #1, and mobile app, definitely. It's not popular in Europe. No one uses mobile apps in Europe for loans. In Southeast Asia, definitely. Websites, they're not so popular. Mobile apps are much more popular.
All right. So and then of course payments. We have the clients, we know how to score them then, but how is the payment processing taking place?
Payments again shifted after COVID mostly to the digital direction. There are so plenty of payment methods in Southeast Asia, and what I really like is that payment companies, they are cooperating and they're trying to provide really convenient service for the end user. When, let's say, I have Gcash wallet, you have some other wallet, and then basically even I can, through my wallet, use your QR or something like this to pay. So what is very convenient. And of course, given that there is a tendency of digitalization of the payment, or actually it's already there, the payments are, majority of them are digital, indeed still there is a cash. Of course, digital channels, wallets, mostly wallets, it's a core thing. But there is one flaw in this payment methods, especially when it's used for the disbursement. In many countries and many e-wallets, you cannot really verify whom you're sending money to. So basically, if you're using some phone number, you're sending to phone number, but you cannot verify really, does this phone number belong to the customer, for example? So that's a drawback, of course, of this. And also another thing is cash loans, meaning that the customer can pick up the cash. Usually those there are some kiosks which have integration with some global, within the country, payment gateway. And when lenders connected to this payment gateway, they're through API, payment processing, the customer can come, show ID, and withdraw the cash from this payment from the kiosk, or through the kiosk, or over the counter in a convenience store. The customer still can pay the loan.
Yeah, yeah. And then you actually see people crowding on the street in line just to make their cash transaction. All right. Yeah, so maybe then let's talk more about human resources and people. So you of course already mentioned that there's a lot of fintech players, a lot of trained people, but maybe something to add if we deep dive. And also maybe what is the role of international management? So in Africa, that was absolutely must have. So the question is, can you trust the locals to run everything from scratch, or you still need the local, let's say your locals to go into foreign market?
I would say that even 5-6 years ago, the foreign management also was must.
Okay.
Nowadays, I would say if you are really putting efforts in hiring, there are enough local people who at least can be supervised distantly. You don't need to sit behind their back, but they can really be supervised differently, and they can be trained properly. And in general, if we talk about the history, the Southeast Asia, it's around 15-20 years younger than Africa, with the exception of Singapore, which is actually the youngest in Southeast Asia and is still the most developed. But what Asians didn't have, they didn't have mostly civil wars, and they invested a lot into education. That's why the literacy level and education level in Southeast Asia is definitely higher. And again, they have Singapore, they have Malaysia, they have South Korea nearby, so where the people are go to study, like for exchange or something. And of course, given the education level is higher, it's much easier to find the talent, and there is less and less situations where someone is hiring just family friends which are lazy and not talented than talent people. So talented people, they started to get their possibilities, they started to be seen, they started to be heard, and they start to be noticed by also some foreign companies, and getting their chance to work in foreign companies. Of course, the management, it must be there. I mean, it must also set up some standards. But again, there is a Singapore. It's possible to hire someone in Singapore to supervise some other countries. And in general,
because there's a lot of expats.
Yes, and in general, we need to also it's very important to highlight that many big companies which are in Southeast Asia, they have headquarters in Singapore. And that's why how they expanded. Even if they started with the Philippines or Vietnam, they have some management sitting in Singapore with international expertise.
Yeah, true. All right. Then maybe speaking about the technology, we also touched upon it, that it's super tech savvy, and yeah, how it's like working with the local vendors.
I would say that it's definitely incomparable with Africa. Yeah. So again, Southeast Asia is tech savvy, and if let's say even we take a look at some loan management system, Temenis is one of the biggest one in Southeast Asia, Switzerland, Mambo, Berlin and Amsterdam, Finastra, England, and they are the biggest ones in Southeast Asia. So meaning that Southeast Asia really embraces working with international companies, and especially that's good, or especially maybe this is the reason why, because again, as we talked, many companies, they start in Singapore and expand somewhere. So for them, it's easier to work with someone who can scale the solution very fast, rather than try to find the solution in each single country. And which, of course, I mean, if the deal is reasonable, definitely it's much easier to get the customer in Southeast Asia. However, again, we are coming back to the competition. So more competitors are aiming also to get customers from the technological companies.
Yeah. Okay, but then maybe as we'll be starting to wrap up slowly. So, how to get the competitive edge if you have decided to enter the region? Because it sounds like big players, very advanced, very competitive. Let's say relatively highly regulated. So how in all this you basically get your market niche?
It's very interesting question. It's a very good question. Because in my point of view, when you are doing the business in a highly competitive and advanced environment, there are basically three key ideas how to pass it through. So first is, of course, partnerships. If you can set up partnership with someone big, that might be a win. Secondly, you have insane amount of money. So basically you can invest into building something big and sustainable. And third one, of course, you notice something and you're smart enough what some other mass market players didn't notice. Again, I'm coming back to example with the seafarers. Yeah, there are only few companies which are giving the loans digitally to the seafarers. However, it's more than 1 million customers in Indonesia, just in Indonesia. Yeah, so, and there are some segments, of course, here and there, especially we talked about SME, that SME is still not so saturated field comparing to mass market. So I believe that there is still, if someone finds a niche, it's possible still to do the proper business. But of course, Southeast Asia is no longer the region where you can jump in, quickly make money and jump out in 3 years. It's not the region anymore like this. However, many people who want to launch the payday special loan, they are still looking at Southeast Asia from this point of view.
Okay. So we covered how to get the competitive edge and finding a niche doing collaborations, but then how to do it in a successful manner so that it actually works out. Maybe some tips and tricks, like very practical, what European companies and maybe others that actually have decided to try out what they should do.
Of course, first thing is, again, to check the regulation if they can afford to launch in one or another country. Maybe someone has 500,000 for launch, someone has 10 million for launch. Of course, it depends. This is the first point when you are crossing out some countries.
Yeah.
Secondly, again, competition. So question is, if I build something similar, I will need to spend a lot of money to get the customers known. So for the acquisition of the customers, or so basically there must be built the logical flow of all the processes in advance, rather than let's launch and then we will just understand how it
Pray
works.
and pray.
Yeah, so this will be super costly nowadays.
Okay.
So the investors, before they're doing, they have to understand each single step, how it will work in details, and that there is a logical chain rather than just jumping in how it was 5 years ago. Oh, five companies joined the Philippines. I will also join Philippines. I have no clue what's happening.
That was exactly what was happening. That was exactly. Why are you going there? Two of my competitors are going there.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, thanks, Stella, for the discussion on the Southeast Asia. So maybe for everyone to remind, we will be meeting also next week, same time, and we'll be talking about Latin America. So hope to see you also in other sessions. And Stella, thanks again, and see you next week.
Thank you so much, Armands, for having me here. See you next week, and have a nice weekend ahead soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.